Chapter 1. In the Clutches of Foreign Charisma. Sometimes even the strongest fortresses crumble not from a frontal assault, but from slow, relentless erosion. That's how the walls Marcus Reinhardt had built around his life over the past 15 years were crumbling. Tiny, barely noticeable cracks that turned into fractures. And then, catastrophe. He felt the first tremors of the earthquake while standing in his dojo in Riverhaven, leaning on a chrome cane. The old wound, a souvenir from the Iraqi desert and a feverish battle in Anbar province, pulsated in his left knee like a personal barometer of approaching trouble. 36 years old, and already partially disabled, a former Marine with a fossilized joint and ghosts of past battles that visited him in nightmares. Alex block higher. Kevin, watch your distance on the street, that mistake cost you teeth. His voice, as always, filled the spacious hall, reflecting off the mirrored walls, where among old battle flags and motivational posters, one stood out, written in his own calligraphic handwriting. Power without control is a weapon without a safety catch. Marcus observed the sparring matches, making notes in his notebook. His warrior spirit center had become a haven for dozens of teenagers whom society had written off. Boys from troubled families, difficult adolescents, kids standing on the threshold of prison. The local authorities of Riverhaven willingly sent troubled children to him. His methods worked where officials and social services were powerless. He was just showing newcomers the correct giant stance when the glass doors swung open, letting in a stream of cold February air and a female figure that even after 12 years of marriage made his heart beat faster. Lauren Reinhardt moved as if music accompanied even her most prosaic movements. Her chestnut hair, gathered in a neat bun, perfectly complemented her dark blue business suit, accentuating her slender figure. But it wasn't Lauren who caught Marcus's gaze. His attention was instantly captured by the tall, athletically built man walking behind her. Something in his gait and his confident, almost predatory grace screamed of a man accustomed to risk and physical superiority. The stranger smiled, a white-toothed, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes that scanned the space with the precision of a laser sight, instantly assessing threats, exits, and potential victims. Victor Kane, Lauren introduced him, and Marcus sensed her unnatural excitement vibrating in her voice. Our new kickboxing trainer. The grant for expanding the rehabilitation program, remember. Victor has an impressive resume. Marcus mechanically shook the extended hand, nodding the calluses on the knuckles, marks of thousands of punches. Kane's grip was firm but not demonstratively aggressive. He knew when to show strength and when to restrain it. A dangerous sign. You have impressive students, Reinhardt, Kane said, carefully examining the training hall. I would say an unplowed field of possibilities. Something in the choice of words, in the intonation, scraped at Marcus's consciousness, as if someone had dragged a nail across the glass of his intuition. But the thought evaporated when he noticed how his 17-year-old son's eyes lit up as he stood among the students. Alex Reinhardt, the pride of the school, winner of 3 regional tournaments, smart but too impressionable young man, couldn't take his eyes off Victor Kane. In his gaze, Marcus saw that all-consuming admiration which he hadn't seen for many years, since his son had crossed the threshold of painful teenage rebellion. Does anyone want to test what I can teach? Kane swept his gaze across the frozen students, stopping on Alex with that special predator's instinct that unerringly picks out the most vulnerable prey. You look talented enough, young man. Alex, no, Marcus started to say, but it was too late. His son had already stepped into the center of the hall, squaring his shoulders and assuming a fighting stance. Something alarming, almost archaic, pricked Marcus, as if he were watching an ancient initiation ritual in which the young man had to prove his right to enter the circle of the chosen. Kane moved like mercury, flowing from form to form. He didn't strike blows, merely evaded Alex's attacks with the grace of a dancer and the precision of a computer. There was a hypnotic beauty in his movements that couldn't be learned from books or video tutorials. Such mastery is given only by those teachers whose methods aren't welcome in official schools. When Alex, breathing heavily, lowered his hands, Victor placed his palm on his shoulder, an almost paternal gesture, if not for the thinly disguised possessiveness in it. There's fire flowing in you, boy, but right now you're like a race car with a factory engine. I can turn you into a real fighting machine. Marcus saw how his son absorbed every word, every gesture of the new mentor, like parched earth absorbs long-awaited rain. He wanted to intervene, but Lauren stopped him, placing her hand on his forearm. Give them a chance to get to know each other. Alex is at the age where he needs different role models. He remained silent, but inside, a familiar anxiety was growing, the same one that had saved his platoon from ambushes in the mountains of Afghanistan. Something about Victor Kane was wrong, like a bullet of the wrong caliber in a rifle magazine. In the evening, when the dojo had emptied, Marcus stayed behind to review Kane's documents. The flawless resume of a former kickboxing champion, recommendations from sports federations, volunteer work with troubled adolescents. Everything was too perfect, like the window display of an expensive store, and Marcus had served in intelligence too long to believe in perfect facades. He was just locking his office when he noticed movement in the training hall. Kane's first training session with a selected group of teenagers had just ended. Marcus observed through the half-open door as the new trainer lined up the strongest students, including Alex, and was telling them something that made their faces glow with grim determination. In real life, there's no place for nightly tournaments, Kane's voice reached him. While you play by the rules, others play to win at any cost. I'll teach you to survive in a world that gives no quarter. Every word found resonance in the hearts of teenagers, tired of moralizing and hungry for simple answers to complex questions. Marcus retreated into the shadows, feeling a chill between his shoulder blades. Kane was forming his inner circle, his elite, and Alex stood at its center, swallowing every word with the eagerness of a neophyte who had found a new prophet. Limping to his car, Marcus couldn't shake off the sense of déjà vu. He had seen similar scenes in destroyed villages of the Middle East, where charismatic leaders recruited young people under the banners of holy war. The only difference was in the setting. His phone vibrated, displaying Lauren's name. Working late, don't wait up for dinner. Driving past the school's administrative building, he noticed his wife's dark blue suit flashing in the window of the Silver Spoon Cafe. She wasn't alone. Without even parking, Marcus recognized the swift silhouette of Victor Kane, leaning toward her across the table. Their fingers touched in that intimate proximity that could only mean one thing. The scene was so banal, so predictable, that it almost didn't cause pain. Like looking at an X-ray with a tumor he had long suspected but avoided diagnosing. Marcus didn't go home. He followed Kane's black Mustang, keeping a safe distance, just as he had once tracked weapon convoys in the Hindu Kush Mountains. The trailer park on the outskirts of River Haven didn't resemble the residence of a successful athlete. Marcus parked in the shadow of an abandoned gas station and watched as Kane entered a shabby trailer that sharply contrasted with his designer clothes and polished image. An hour later, more guests appeared, two men with that peculiar wariness in their movements that could only be acquired behind prison walls. One of them vaguely reminded Marcus of someone from crime reports. He took several photos on his phone before the pain in his knee became unbearable. In the morning, locked in his office, he ran a search on the images. The result made him freeze in front of the screen. Ray Scorpion Larson, former leader of a biker gang, recently released on parole after serving time for arms trafficking. And next to him, a young gangster, presumably involved in a series of armed robberies. Marcus switched to searching for information about Victor Kane. Behind the perfect facade of the resume, he found emptiness. No trace of a professional kickboxing career, no publications, no interviews. as if this man hadn't existed before appearing in their town. He delved deeper into the search, using old military connections and database access that one of his former comrades had maintained. Within an hour, a different picture emerged before him. Vincent Cortez, with 3 convictions for assault, who had served 7 years for armed robbery with aggravating circumstances. Last release, 8 months ago. Photos from the police file left no doubt, despite the beard and different hairstyle. This was Victor Kane, the man to whom his wife had entrusted the rehabilitation program for troubled teenagers. The man who was increasingly influencing his son. And the documents submitted to the program. Marcus frantically flipped through them. Recommendations, diplomas, certificates, everything was a skillful forgery, and Lauren's visa was on every page. Did she know? Did she consciously help this wolf sneak into the sheepfold, or had she become another victim of a manipulator's charm? Outside his office window, Kane, now Marcus mentally called him Cortez, was conducting another training session with his elite group. A dozen of the strongest, most aggressive students were concentratedly practicing strikes that weren't in the official dojo program. Strikes designed not for victory in competitions, but for inflicting maximum damage on the streets. Alex stood at the center of the group, his clean, open face transformed. A new hardness had appeared in it, as if someone had etched away the soft lines of the teenager and exposed a predatory core. Cortez put his hand on Alex's shoulder with that possessive gesture that had once belonged only to Marcus. "You're the best of anyone I've trained," these words, spoken with the calculated intimacy of a mentor, became the final piece of the puzzle Marcus had assembled. He understood the scheme. Cortez wasn't just training fighters. He was forming a criminal group of teenagers who would blindly follow him out of devotion and thirst for recognition. And his son, his Alex, was the cornerstone of this plan. Chapter 2: The Worm in the Paradise Apple. Alarming metastases were spreading through Riverhaven, as if someone had opened an abscess on the body of the sleepy town. In 2 months, the number of street skirmishes had doubled. Complaints about teenage gangs had increased. The school psychologist spoke about a new subculture that had emerged among high school students, a cult of power and superiority. Marcus Reinhardt felt these changes more acutely than others. He observed them in his home, at his own dinner table, where the third chair was increasingly empty. "Alex, we were waiting for you for dinner," he said, standing in the doorway of his son's room, who had just slipped into the house like a shadow. "Sorry, Dad, I had things to do." Alex didn't even turn around, engrossed in typing something on his phone. A new leather jacket, clearly beyond his modest budget, gleamed on the back of the chair. "What things does a 17-year-old student have at 1 in the morning?" "The usual, extra training with Victor. He says I have potential at the national level." Marcus noticed a fresh bruise on his son's cheekbone, which he wasn't particularly trying to hide. "Is that also part of the training?" He pointed to the bruise. Alex shrugged with that new, careless arrogance that had appeared in him after beginning lessons with Kane. "Real fights don't come without marks. Victor says every scar is a lesson you'll never forget. We have a different philosophy at our center." "Your philosophy," Alex emphasized, turning to face his father for the first time during the conversation. "Victor sees things as they are, not as he wants them to be. In the real world, the strongest wins, and all this talk about self-control and respect, just fairy tales for the weak." Marcus felt a cold needle pierce his heart. These were not his son's words. This was a perfectly absorbed sermon from the new mentor. "Victor says, Victor thinks." Marcus inadvertently raised his voice. "Since when did the opinion of a stranger become more important to you than family values?" "Since he became the only one who believes in my real potential," Alex blurted out. "You've always seen me as just a child who needs protection, but he sees me as a warrior." "A warrior?" Marcus smiled bitterly. "I knew real warriors, son. I buried them in the Afghan desert and Iraqi sands. A real warrior protects the weak, not intimidates them. For a second, something resembling doubt flickered in Alex's eyes, but he quickly suppressed this impulse. You just can't accept that someone can teach me more than you. He turned to the window, indicating that the conversation was over. Marcus wanted to say something else, but realized the futility of further attempts. The wall between them was growing higher and thicker with each day. Limping toward his bedroom, Marcus heard the front door slam. Lauren had returned. On Saturdays, she usually finished no later than 6, but for the second month, her work meetings had stretched until midnight. He didn't ask where she had been. She didn't inquire why he was still awake. They moved along their separate orbits, like two asteroids that once formed a single whole but were torn apart by an unknown force. And that force was Victor Kane, a man who had broken into their family like a skilled safecracker, leaving no traces. 2 days later, conducting a regular inventory inspection, Marcus discovered the missing keys to the center's back door, a spare set that could only have been taken by staff or close family members. At night, after Lauren had fallen asleep, he returned to the dojo. Kane's black Mustang was parked in the shadow of trees, hiding it from casual eyes. The light in the training hall was dimmed, but even from his hiding place, Marcus could see more than 20 figures gathered around Kane. Just training for the real thing. Kane's voice sounded muffled but distinguishable through the partially open window. Everyone must prove they're worthy to be part of our family. Only the bravest, the most loyal will make it into the core team. Marcus made out Alex's tall figure among the clustered teenagers. His son stood out even in the darkness. Natural athleticism and years of training under his father's guidance had turned him into the embodiment of young power. And this power was now being channeled by Kane in a direction advantageous to him. Tomorrow you'll get the diagrams and schedule, Kane continued. The first stage is observation. Every detail matters. One of the teenagers raised his hand. What if we get caught? Kane smirked. Even in the half-darkness, Marcus could see that predatory smile. That's the key distinction of our operation, friends. No one will suspect you. Who pays attention to teenagers? Who takes high school students from a sports school seriously? You are the perfect cover. Marcus felt his heart pounding in his temples. He didn't know exactly what Kane was planning, but his intuition screamed danger. All he could do was watch and gather information, just as he had once done behind enemy lines in Fallujah. He didn't notice Lauren emerging from the shadows. The ribbed heel of her shoe clicked on the asphalt, giving her away. What are you doing here? Her voice sounded not frightened but rather irritated. I could ask you the same question. Marcus looked at his wife, trying to see in this cold, elegantly dressed woman the girl who had once healed his wounds after his return from Iraq. I have a meeting with Victor about a new grant for the program. She instinctively adjusted her hair. Are you spying on me? Not on you, on Kane. He's not who he claims to be, Lauren. Don't start, she waved her hand irritably. Your eternal suspicion. You've been seeing conspiracies around every corner since you returned from the war. This isn't paranoia. I have evidence. His real name is Vincent Cortez. He has 3 convictions and not a single real kickboxing title. Lauren went quiet, and something resembling fear momentarily flickered in her eyes, but she quickly composed herself. You checked him without my knowledge. Marcus, I'm the head of the rehabilitation program. This is my responsibility. And apparently you don't check your staff's resumes too thoroughly. Or, he paused, looking intently at his wife, you knew and you were okay with it. Lauren averted her gaze. I don't have time for these conversations. I'm expected. She turned sharply and headed toward the entrance of the dojo, marking the seconds of their ruined marriage with her heels against the asphalt. The following evening, Marcus sat in Sheriff Donovan's office. the only person in Riverhaven he could fully trust. The sheriff listened attentively, without interrupting, creaking in his leather chair, a habit developed over 30 years of service. "You do understand that I need more than your suspicions?" he asked when Marcus finished his story. "I can't arrest a man for conducting extra training sessions with teenagers." "I know, Jack, but I feel something serious is brewing. Kane is meeting with Ray Larson, remember his gang?" The sheriff frowned. "How could I forget? 3 years ago, they caused such a commotion that we had to call in a SWAT team from Portland." He looked intently at Marcus. "Are you sure about Kane's connection to Larson?" "I have photos and Kane's criminal record. His real name is Vincent Cortez. Check through your channels." Donovan nodded. "I'll check, but stay out of it, Mark. If your suspicions are correct, this guy is more dangerous than he appears." But Marcus couldn't stay out of it, not when his son was at the epicenter of the forming storm. That same night, he was again at the dojo, observing another secret meeting. Kane stood before his proteges, distributing some papers. "Here's the route diagram. The cash-in-transit van stops at the traffic light for exactly 43 seconds. That's more than enough. The police won't have time to respond." Marcus froze. They were talking about an armed robbery. "Wait," Alex's voice sounded unexpectedly loud. "You talked about competitions, about proving ourselves, not about robbery." Kane put his hand on the young man's shoulder. "Alex, my friend, this is the most important competition. Proof of your loyalty, your strength. Don't you want to be the best? Don't you want to prove you're worthy to be my successor?" Marcus saw his son hesitate. That part of his nature that had been raised by his father was fighting against the new, dark side cultivated by Kane. I'm not sure." Alex took a step back. "Such talent and such weakness," Kane shook his head. "I'm disappointed, Alex, very disappointed." These words struck the young man like a whip. Marcus saw how his son's facial expression changed. Uncertainty gave way to determination. "No, I'm not weak. I'll prove it." "That's my boy," Kane smiled. "You'll be my right hand, the leader among all." Marcus recoiled from the window, feeling the old wound pulsating with unbearable pain. He urgently needed to talk to his son, to pull him out from under the influence of this monster. But how to reach Alex, who was completely under Kane's hypnotic influence? The answer came unexpectedly. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Sheriff Donovan. "Mark, you were right about Cortez, and that's not all. We received operational information. Larson is planning something big. A cash-in-transit van with money for 3 city banks. Tomorrow at 10:30. Cold sweat broke out on Marcus's forehead. Tomorrow. He had only one night left to save his son. Chapter 3. The Beast's Lair. Marcus observed pre-dawn Riverhaven from his house porch. The town was slowly, reluctantly waking to life. Traffic lights changed colors in the empty air. A cleaning machine monotonously crawled along Main Street. Rare cars hurried to early shifts at the Henderson Metal Works factory. An ordinary morning for everyone except him and 24 teenagers preparing to commit a crime that would forever change their lives. The clock hands counted down the minutes until the operation to detain Larson's gang began, but Marcus's thoughts were focused on one thing: how to extract Alex from this web without completely destroying his life. The door behind him creaked. Lauren came out onto the porch with a cup of coffee. She looked aged by 10 years. Shadows had settled under her eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't hide. "You didn't sleep." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. "Neither did you." Marcus accepted the cup from her hands, nodding the slight tremor in his wife's fingers. They stood silently, watching as the first rays of sunlight painted the rooftops a golden color. Once, many years ago, they had loved to meet sunrises together. Now each sunrise seemed like an epitaph to their marriage. "I know everything, Lauren," Marcus finally said, looking at the horizon. "About you and Kane. about how you helped him with the documents, about what will happen today." Lauren clutched the cup so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "I didn't know about the robbery, I swear to you. I thought. I believed he really wanted to help these children. But you knew about his past." She nodded, not raising her eyes. He told me his story, about how he himself was a troubled teenager, how he ended up in prison because of a mistake, how he vowed to help those like himself. It sounded so convincing. For a psychologist, you're surprisingly easily caught by a classic manipulator's technique. Lauren finally raised her gaze. Shame and desperation mingled in her eyes. "You don't understand, Marcus. After you returned from Iraq, you closed yourself off. All these years I've been living with a ghost, with a man who was physically nearby but whose soul remained there in the war. Victor was so alive, so real. And real enough to use you for access to the teenagers you were supposed to help, including our son." These words hit the mark. Lauren flinched, and a tear slowly rolled down her cheek. "I messed up, Marcus. I ruined everything." He wanted to embrace her, comfort her, as he had done countless times during their years of marriage. But something stopped him, perhaps the realization that some wounds are too deep for healing. "The sheriff knows about Larson and Kane's plans. They're preparing an operation," he said instead. "But I need to get Alex out before it all starts." "Marcus, Lauren began. "Not now," he interrupted her. "We need to save our son. Everything else can wait." He returned to the house, feeling that for the first time in a long while, his knee barely hurt. Combat adrenaline, familiar from hot spots, was displacing the physical pain. From the safe, he retrieved a spare pistol, a gift from Donovan for emergencies. He checked the magazine, set the safety. "What are you going to do?" Lauren stood in the doorway, watching his preparations. "What I must, be a father." The Quiet Pines trailer park on the outskirts of Riverhaven had never lived up to its name. Rusty car carcasses, weed-grown lots and faded curtains in the windows had long lost any connection to quiet or pines. Here, in a shabby trailer with number 17, Victor Kane had gathered his team. Marcus parked half a mile from the park and covered the last stretch on foot, ignoring the pulsating pain in his knee. Years of special operations had taught him to move silently even with an injury. He circled the perimeter, nodding the sentries, 2 adult men with characteristic prison mannerisms patrolling the area. Larson's thugs, without doubt. Sheltered behind an abandoned van, Marcus watched as teenagers in dark clothes emerged from Kane's trailer, with backpacks on their shoulders. Their faces were focused, movements tense. Each of them was balancing on the edge between childhood and a criminal career. Alex came out second to last, followed by Kane in an inconspicuous black jacket. Marcus painfully noted how his son had changed over these months. From an open, smiling teenager, he had transformed into a tough, grim young man with a prickly gaze. "Everyone ready?" Kane's voice sounded muffled, but Marcus could make out every word. "Remember the plan. No improvisation. Act quickly and clearly. After the job, we meet here for division and briefing." The group loaded into 2 minivans with tinted windows. Kane held Alex back, placing his hand on his shoulder. "You're with me in the lead car. I want you to see everything from beginning to end. This is your initiation, Alex. After this, you'll become my right hand." Marcus saw how his son straightened up. Pride and doubt battled on his face. "Victor, Alex began, but Kane cut him off. "No time for hesitation. You're either with us or against us. There's no middle ground." Alex nodded and they headed toward the lead minivan. Marcus had to act immediately. Kane didn't yet know that the police were preparing an ambush at the planned robbery site. If Alex ended up there with a weapon in hand, no suspended sentence would await him. Only prison. He emerged from his hiding place and, overcoming the pain, moved forward. Now or never. "Alex," his voice cut through the morning silence of the park. "Stop." His son froze, slowly turning around. His eyes widened in shock. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Cain reacted instantly. With one movement, he positioned himself between Alex and Marcus, his hand sliding under his jacket, where a pistol was undoubtedly hidden. Reinhardt, a smirk touched Cain's lips, decided to play the hero again. "Step away from my son," Marcus spoke calmly, but a storm raged inside him. "The police are already aware of your plan. An ambush is waiting for you at the site." Cain laughed. "And you expect me to believe that? Classic bluff. However, I don't have time for these games. Alex, get in the car." "Don't listen to him, son." Marcus took a step forward. "You know I'm telling the truth. You've known me all your life. And him, do you really know who he is?" Alex shifted his gaze from his father to Cain and back, clearly torn between two authorities. "His real name is Vincent Cortez," Marcus continued. 3 convictions, 7 years in prison for armed robbery. He's using you just as he's used others before you, as he used your mother." "Shut up!" Cain stepped forward, his face distorted with rage. "Stop listening to him, Alex. He's jealous of you, of your potential. Always has been. An old, broken soldier who needs to cling to his glorious past because in the present he's nothing." Alex looked at his father with wide eyes. "Is it true about Mom?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, but she didn't know about his plans. He manipulated her just as he's manipulating you. That's what he does, Alex. Uses people's weaknesses against them." "Time's running out," Cain hissed, glancing back at the minivans where the other participants in the robbery were impatiently waiting. "Decide, Alex. Who are you, a warrior or a mommy's boy?" Alex stood as if rooted to the spot, between the two men, like between two poles of a magnet tearing him apart. "I don't know what to do," his voice faltered, and for a moment Marcus saw in him that little boy who had been afraid of monsters under the bed and asked his father to check the closet before bedtime. "Trust your heart, Alex," Marcus said quietly. "Beneath all this veneer, you know who you really are." Cain jerked forward, pulling out a pistol. "Enough of this sniveling. Either you come with me, or I'll shoot your daddy right now and then deal with you." Marcus saw how his son's facial expression changed. Confusion gave way to determination. At that moment, a woman with a garbage bag came out of a neighboring trailer and, noticing the armed Cain, screamed. This served as a trigger. Cain instinctively turned toward the scream, and Alex seized the moment. Years of training in the dojo hadn't been in vain. With lightning speed, he struck Cain in the solar plexus, simultaneously knocking the pistol from his hand. Cain staggered back but quickly regained his balance. His eyes turned to icy slits. "You'll regret this, pup," he growled and lunged at Alex with the fury of an enraged bull. Marcus rushed forward, overcoming the pain in his knee, but Alex was handling it himself. He evaded Cain's attacks with the grace he had inherited from his mother and delivered precise counterstrikes learned from his father. It was a perfect synthesis of their common heritage. Teenagers and adult gangsters were already jumping out of the minivans, attracted by the noise. Marcus picked up the knocked-out pistol and aimed it at the approaching crowd. "Freeze, police are on their way." Confirming his words, the wail of sirens was heard in the distance. Donovan had received his text message and dispatched patrols. Most of the teenagers froze in indecision, while Larson's adult accomplices rushed to their cars. Cain and Alex continued their struggle, teacher and student in a deadly dance, where each knew the other's movements by heart. But Cain's experience was beginning to tell. He delivered a series of brutal blows, pushing Alex back toward the trailer wall. "You could have become great," Cain exhaled, raining down blow after blow. "Could have become my successor. Now you'll just be a corpse." His hand slid to his belt, extracting a hunting knife with a serrated blade. Alex backed away, but his back was already against the metal wall of the trailer. Marcus didn't hesitate. With military precision, he aimed and fired. The bullet passed within a millimeter of Kane's head, leaving a smoking hole in the trailer's siding. "The next one will be center mass." Marcus's voice rang with that cold, professional confidence that made even the most desperate fighters obey. "Drop the knife." But Kane wasn't one to surrender. With a wild roar, he lunged forward, swinging the knife. Time stretched, like in a cheap action movie. Marcus saw the gleam of the blade aimed at his son's chest, saw Alex's eyes widened with fear, saw every detail with the crystal clarity of a fighter in an extreme situation. He had already begun to squeeze the trigger when something dark flew from the side and knocked Kane off his feet. A backpack. One of the teenagers, Marcus recognized Derek Foster, Alex's closest friend, had hurled a heavy backpack with tools, hitting Kane squarely in the head. He crashed to the ground, dropping the knife. Alex didn't hesitate. With lightning-fast reflexes, he picked up the weapon and pointed the blade at his prostrate mentor. "Don't move, just don't move." Kane looked at him with the fury of a cornered predator. "You're nothing, Alex, always have been. I wasted my time on you." "Maybe," Alex shrugged, "but at least I'm not a traitor and a liar." The sirens sounded closer. Marcus approached his son and put his hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing." "I know, Dad." Alex didn't take his eyes off the fallen Kane. "Now I know." Chapter 4, Settling Accounts. Courtroom number 3 of the River Haven District Court was unusually full for a provincial town. The case of Kane Cortez and Larson's gang had become a sensation not only locally, but also regionally. Dozens of reporters from neighboring towns crowded at the entrance, hopping to get at least some comments from the participants in the trial. Marcus Reinhardt sat in the front row, watching his son testify. Alex looked older than his years in a formal blue suit that they had chosen together the day before. His voice sounded clear and confident as he recounted how Kane had manipulated teenagers, preparing them for criminal activities. "He said we would become a new elite." Alex looked directly at the jurors. "That only through a test of strength could one prove their worth. He played on our weaknesses, our fears, our desire to be accepted and valued." Kane sat at the defense table in a prison jumpsuit, with the same predatory expression that had once attracted teenagers. But now it evoked only disgust. Ray Larson and 3 of his accomplices were positioned beside him. The district attorney, a tall woman with a razor-sharp mind, methodically built the prosecution's case, connecting Kane's activities at the dojo with the robbery plans, showing the jury diagrams found on those arrested and weapons seized during searches. "Tell me, Mr. Reinhardt," the prosecutor addressed Alex, "why did you decide at the last moment not to participate in the robbery?" Alex momentarily lowered his gaze, collecting his thoughts. "I realized that everything my father had taught me all these years, control, discipline, respect, these aren't just words. They're the foundation of real strength. And what Victor offered," he corrected himself, "Mr. Cortez, that was an illusion of strength. Power through fear and violence. I didn't want to become that." Kane smirked, but his lawyer cautioningly touched his arm. Marcus saw that his son's former mentor still radiated that special charisma that acts on people like a drug. Even here in the courtroom, some of his former students cast admiring glances at him. "And what do you want to become, Mr. Reinhardt?" asked the prosecutor, clearly deviating from her prepared list of questions. Alex didn't hesitate for a second. "Like my father, a person who uses his strength to protect those who are weaker, a person of honor." Lauren, sitting 2 rows behind Marcus, quietly sobbed. Over the past few weeks, she had aged several years, lost her job in social services, and become the object of public condemnation. Now she was preparing for her own hearings regarding negligence in document verification. When the session was declared closed until the next day, Marcus waited for his son at the exit from the hall. Alex walked with his head down. Giving testimony against someone you had admired is always difficult, even if that person betrayed your trust. You did well, Marcus embraced his son's shoulders. I'm proud of you. Really? Alex raised his eyes. After everything I've done. Especially after that. Acknowledging your mistakes, correcting them, and moving forward, that takes real courage. They left the courthouse together, squinting in the bright May sunlight. Away from the crowd of reporters stood Lauren, shifting uncertainly from foot to foot. Her gaze was fixed on her son. Go, Marcus said quietly. Talk to your mom. She also made a mistake, and she also needs your forgiveness. Alex hesitated. The resentment toward his mother was still too strong. But then he nodded and headed toward her. Marcus watched as they awkwardly embraced, the first step toward restoring what had seemed irretrievably lost. Sheriff Donovan approached, offering a cup of coffee. Tough day. One of many. Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. What do you think the verdict will be? For Cortez and Larson, maximum sentence if we're lucky with the judge. For the teenagers, it all depends on the degree of participation. Your Alex will likely get off with probation and community service, considering his cooperation and confession. They stood in silence, watching Alex and Lauren, still engrossed in conversation. And how are things with her? Donovan finally asked, nodding toward Lauren. Marcus shrugged. Hard to say, too much has happened. We talked about divorce, but now I'm not sure. Maybe everything needs time. Time doesn't heal all wounds, the sheriff philosophically remarked, but it gives perspective, and perspective is half the healing. A week later, Victor Cortez received 23 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Ray Larson, 19 years. The other gang members, from 5 to 15, depending on the severity of their participation and prior convictions. For Alex and most of the involved teenagers, the court showed leniency. 500 hours of community service, 2 years of probation, and mandatory counseling with a psychologist. But the real punishment for them was not the legal responsibility, but the realization of how close they had come to the edge of the abyss. The Warrior Spirit Center was temporarily closed. Too many rumors, too many suspicions now surrounded this once respected center for rehabilitation of troubled teenagers. Marcus sat in the empty training hall, looking at the faded posters, punching bags, dust-covered mats. So much work, so many hopes had been invested in these walls, and everything collapsed in a matter of months because of one person with the charisma of a predator and the soul of a con artist. The creaking of floorboards announced Alex's arrival. His son sat beside him, placing some bundle on his knees. This was in my room. He unwrapped the cloth, and Marcus saw a black belt with his son's name embroidered in gold thread. I received it 3 years ago. Then it seemed like the most important achievement in my life. It was important, Marcus said quietly. You earned that belt through your work and discipline. And then I betrayed everything it symbolizes. Alex ran his fingers over the embroidery. I don't even know if I have the right to wear it now. Marcus put his hand on his son's shoulder. The belt is not just a symbol of mastery. It's a symbol of the path, and on any path there are falls. What matters is not that you fall, but that you find the strength to rise. Alex nodded, folding the belt back up. I think we could reopen the center, under a different name maybe, with a new philosophy. You think so? Marcus looked at his son with surprise. After everything that happened. Precisely because of that. These guys, Derek, Kevin, the others, they need a place where they can channel their energy in the right direction. A place where they'll be taught real strength, not the illusion that Cain offered. Marcus pondered. The suggestion was unexpected, but it made sense. Perhaps this is exactly what the town needed now, a symbol of rebirth after trauma. I'll think about it, he finally said. But it won't be easy. The townspeople won't soon forget what happened. And we won't ask them to forget. In Alex's eyes appeared a new fire, but not that cold gleam that Cain had planted there, but a bright, warm flame of determination. We'll ask them to believe in themselves, in us, in the possibility of redemption. Marcus looked at his son with surprise and pride. At 17, Alex had traveled a path that some don't travel in a lifetime, from blind submission to authority to conscious moral choice. They left the dojo together, taking a final look at the empty hall. Tomorrow, workers would come to dismantle the equipment and prepare the premises for sale. But perhaps this wasn't an end, but a beginning of something new. The sun was setting, painting Riverhaven in shades of gold and crimson. On the center's porch waited Lauren, for the first time in a long while without makeup, her hair gathered in a simple ponytail. Marcus noted that she had come to resemble the young woman he had fallen in love with 15 years ago. "We're having dinner at Johnny's," she said, smiling uncertainly. If you both don't mind." Marcus and Alex exchanged glances. It was a simple question, but behind it stood so much. The possibility of forgiveness, a chance for a new beginning, a choice between the bitterness of the past and the uncertainty of the future. "I'm hungry," Alex broke the silence first, "and Johnny makes the best burgers in the county." They moved toward the car, not quite a family but no longer strangers. The wounds inflicted by betrayal still stung, but the bleeding had stopped, and where blood ceases to flow, healing begins. Chapter 5: Rebirth from the Ashes. Phoenix Center for Martial Arts and Psychological Support proclaimed the new sign above the renovated building on Maple Street. 6 months had passed since the trial, and Riverhaven was gradually returning to its usual rhythm of life. The scars of the scandal were still felt in the cautious glances of townspeople and hushed conversations, but time was doing its work, memory was dulling, giving way to new events. Marcus Reinhardt stood in the center of the training hall, watching as the first students settled into the new space. There weren't many, just 12 teenagers, including 7 from the old center who had received permission from the judge to continue martial arts training as part of their rehabilitation program. The rest were newcomers, attracted by the unusual concept of the center, where physical training was combined with psychological practices. "Let's begin with meditation." Marcus led the students into a circle, and they sat on soft mats in the center of the hall. "Close your eyes, focus on your breathing, feel how the air fills your body with energy." Alex sat to the right of his father, helping newcomers assume the correct posture. At 18, he was no longer just a student. He had become a junior instructor, gradually taking over the work to which Marcus had dedicated the last decade. After meditation, physical training began. Marcus watched as his son demonstrated the technique of blocks and strikes, explaining each movement with patience that once had been characteristic only of his father. "The power of the strike doesn't come from the arm," Alex was saying, demonstrating the technique to a newcomer. "It comes from the ground through the entire body. Imagine yourself as a single whole where each part supports the other." Marcus noticed how Derek Foster, the same one who had thrown the backpack at Kane in that critical moment, saving Alex, was helping a weaker boy practice his stance. The same Derek, who had once been one of Kane's most aggressive followers, now showed patience and care, which he had learned from Alex. Changes encompassed not just the center. After long conversations, family therapy sessions, and painful admissions, Marcus and Lauren decided to give their marriage another chance. It wasn't an easy path. Too much pain, too much left unsaid had accumulated over the years. But each day they took a small step toward each other, learning trust and openness anew. Lauren no longer worked in social services. After the scandal with Kane, she had to leave, but she found a new calling. Now she conducted psychological counseling at the Phoenix, helping teenagers understand their emotions and motivations. Her experience, both painful and professional, proved invaluable for those who were balancing on the edge between making the right choice and self-destruction. After training, when the students had dispersed and Alex stayed behind to help clean up the equipment, Marcus found a small box wrapped in plain brown paper on his office desk. "What's this?" he asked Alex, who was pretending to be completely absorbed in folding the mats. "Just open it," his son replied, restraining a smile. Inside the box lay a new belt black, with the hieroglyphs for wisdom, courage, and compassion embroidered in gold thread. And beneath it, a photograph of Marcus with Alex and Lauren, taken a week before the whole story with Cain. They smiled at the camera, standing at the entrance to the old center, a happy family, not yet knowing about the trials ahead. "I thought we had lost this photograph," Marcus said quietly, running his finger over the image. "It was in an old album." Alex moved closer. "I thought, we've lost so much, but maybe not everything is irretrievably lost. Maybe some things can be restored, even if they'll be different." Marcus looked at his son. In his eyes was a wisdom that comes only through falling and rebirth. They embraced silently. Words were unnecessary. Each of them had gone through their own dark night of the soul and emerged from it changed, but not broken. "The new enrollment starts in a month," Alex said as they left the center, locking the doors. "Sheriff Donovan says the judge will refer 5 more teenagers to us under the rehabilitation program." "We'll manage," Marcus nodded. "Together we'll manage." They walked along the evening streets of Riverhaven, father and son, teacher and student, two people connected not only by blood but also by a shared experience of overcoming. Ahead of them lay a long path of restoration, personal, familial, communal. But they had already taken the first, most difficult step. At home, Lauren awaited them with a prepared dinner. She arranged the plates with that meticulousness that had always been characteristic of her, but now a new softness had appeared in her movements, as if the sharp corners of her character had been smoothed by the pain she had endured. "How was the first day?" she asked when they sat down at the table. "Better than I expected," Marcus replied. "The kids are really trying." "They need this." Lauren served the food with the care that had once been the foundation of their family life. Structure, rules, understanding that strength requires responsibility. They dined, discussing future plans for the center, new methodologies they wanted to implement, potential sponsors they needed to attract. An ordinary family dinner, the kind they hadn't had for a very long time. After dinner, Marcus went out onto the back porch of the house, leaning on his cane. His knee still hurt. Some wounds never heal completely. But he had learned to live with this pain, turning it into a reminder of the fragility and value of life. The evening sky over Riverhaven blazed with all shades of purple, a color symbolizing transformation and rebirth. Marcus watched this spectacle of nature, thinking about how close they had come to the edge of the abyss and how miraculously they had found their way back. The creak of the door announced Lauren's appearance. She approached and stood beside him, not touching him, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body. "Beautiful," she said, looking at the sunset. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "Life is beautiful in general if you know where to look." They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching as the last rays of the sun painted the clouds purple, a color that had become the symbol of their new center, their new life. "Will we make it, Marcus?" In her voice sounded uncertainty, so rarely manifested in the former, always composed Lauren. He didn't answer immediately, weighing in his mind all the pros and cons, everything they had been through, all the wounds that still needed healing. Finally, he nodded. "Day by day, Lauren, step by step." It wasn't the answer she had expected, but the only honest answer he could give. And for both of them, it was enough: honesty, the possibility of new beginnings, and faith that the darkest nights always precede dawn. When they returned to the house, Alex was already asleep, exhausted after a tense day. Marcus peeked into his room. The boy who had so quickly become a man sprawled on the bed, tucking the pillow under his cheek, just as he had in childhood. On the table next to the bed lay his black belt and a stack of psychology books. He was preparing for college, combining it with work at the center. Marcus quietly closed the door, feeling something warm blossoming in his chest. They had gone through hell and returned, changed, burned but alive. And as long as they preserved this life within themselves, as long as they found the strength to rise after falls and learn from mistakes, they had a chance. A chance for healing, a chance for forgiveness, a chance to become better than they were before. And no one could ask for more, even from fate itself.